Cycling technology, it's ever evolving, and that's particularly so with the advancement in drivetrain systems. And when we look specifically at the development of 12 and 13 speed group sets, wow, the changes are revolutionary. The last few years there's been a bigger and bigger push towards 12 and 13 speed group sets. It's something at first I wasn't particularly excited in, but now I'm beginning to change my opinion, and I think that this move towards 12 and 13 speeds could be one of the most significant changes over the last 10 to 20 years. Before I tell you why I think that's the case, let's have a brief look at the history of the 13 speed group set. The first commercially available 13 speed 1x group set was by the manufacturer Rotor. Surprising because they're not really part of the major component manufacturers, which are Campagnolo, Shimano and SRAM. However, they got there in 2019 and they came up with a pretty good product, to be fair. So, who was second? That was Campagnolo. They're known for innovation and they came out with a fantastic group set, the ACAR, and of course, being Campagnolo, beautiful, smooth, nicely working group set. Now that came out in 2020 and you would have thought that Shimano and SRAM would have been all over it, but they haven't been. They really haven't. So what the hell's gone on? At this time, SRAM had already had their red ETAP AXS 12 speed out for some time, and they saw a lot of potential in a 13 speed, but nothing to market. It's still not at market, however. Take a look at this. These are a few photos caught at the major gravel race in Kansas, where you can actually see there's a 13 speed SRAM 1x setup using AXS red ETAP technology. A year before they introduced a 12 speed, when this 13 speed's going to come to market, it's really anyone's idea, but it does really show that they have an intent to be part of this pretty exciting market. So what about Shimano? The big surprise is that Shimano are right at the end of development compared to all other major component manufacturers. They haven't released anything. There are designs in place and hopefully they'll have something to market soon, but at the moment they're still relying on the 12 speed Di2, though it is rumoured that very soon they will be releasing a 13 speed 1x to go in line with their 12 speed Di2. That probably will be released at the higher end of their component hierarchy, so it'll be available most likely for Dura-Race and Ultegra, maybe in time on 105. And I kind of think that's a mistake. And I also think there's a big opportunity being missed here for this focus on the higher end of the market for 13 speeds. It's something I will come on to in a little while, but first let's look at what the advantages are of a 1x compared to a 2x. There's quite a few advantages in having a 1x system over a 2x, but I think the main advantage is reliability. When you take away a front derailleur and a front changer, you've got less to go wrong. Also, when you have a 2x, when you're moving the chain between the smaller chain ring and the larger chain ring, there's a chance of the chain falling off. So less chance of some kind of problem when you're actually riding the bike and the chain coming off. They're, I think, the main advantages, but there are other advantages too. The other one is cost, because you have one less chain ring, one less derailleur, and you have one less gear changer on your cockpit. That should cut down on cost, cable routing as well. The other advantage though, at the higher end, people that are really into road racing and looking for marginal gains, are the fact that it's more aerodynamic and also there's less weight. Now, these on their own, I think, are enough in most instances to sway a lot of people to actually go into a one-by system, but it's not perfect. And I think one of the biggest negatives that people focus on is actually both the gear range, which I don't think is necessarily correct, but one thing you can't argue with is the fact that the distance between changing in gears is a lot larger when you only have a 13 speed compared to, say, a 2x12. However, that change isn't massive. Now, if you look at the chart here, this is a very nice chart supplied by Road CC. Thanks very much for that, guys. It compares a 2x12 setup to a 1x12 setup. Now, the purple highlighted areas or boxes show the 2x12 gear ratios, and you can see the ratio goes from, at the very low end, 1.29 all the way up to 4.73. For the 1x12, it goes from 1.33 to 4.8. That's not a big difference at all. There is a difference, but it's not great. There's probably maybe 5 or 10% in it. And remember, this is comparing a 1x12 to a 2x12. And since we don't have 2x13s, we should really be comparing it to a 2x12 to a 1x13 if we're looking at natural progressions. The difference you can see is in the ratios, and the changes are much narrower when you look at the 2x12 setup, but it shouldn't be a deal breaker really. I've focused on the closeness of range on the gear ratios between 1x to a 2x setup, because this is often the biggest criticism against a 1x setup. But I can say with confidence, I don't think it's that big a deal, even for professional road racers, because in the pro peloton, teams like Jumbo Visma are increasingly using the 1x setup. And if it's good enough for them, I'm sure it's good enough for the likes of you and me. Sure, it's nice to be able to sit at a comfortable cadence when you're on a road bike, and those bigger jumps are not exactly desirable, but I think the potential gains, particularly if you're on a road bike and looking for the fastest time you can, when you look at the fact that you'll get better aero and also less weight, I think that actually offsets the fact that you can't quite get the cadence you want. But a 13 speed shouldn't only be for road cyclists, and this is the point I want to come back to that I mentioned earlier. I think the focus is too much on road bikes. It's all, okay, Shimano, let's bring it out with Di2, top of the range. It's going to be first with Dura Ace, and then it's going to be with Ultegra, maybe trickle down eventually to 105. You look at the ETAP system, it's bloody expensive, we know it is. All the focus is on road riding, but how many people actually buy a road bike? And what percentage of the population are involved in road racing or using road bikes? It's not actually that high. The figures here, courtesy of Treads.co, showing the cycling statistics in the UK for 2022, you can see that the most popular search for any kind of bike is a mountain bike with 2.4 million online searches a year, road bikes 707,000, hybrid bikes at 506,000. That means the percentage of people interested in road biking are around 20%. I've looked at other statistics. I think it's a little bit lower than that, maybe around 15%, with people actually involved in road biking over other forms of cycling. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that all the research and development is going into road bikes, yet the majority of people, they're just not using road bikes. It reminds me of this kind of obsession with the cycling industry for making bike frames that only a super fit 25-year-old with the flexibility of a cat can reasonably ride. A lot of the time the cycling industry seem to be too focused on higher end racing bikes, and that's probably because most of the people working in that industry, that's where they've come from. It's a mistake. I really think it is. I think where 13 speeds can really shine is for the majority of the likes of you and me. I think on a gravel bike, on a town bike, on a commuter bike, on a mountain bike, 13 speed could be absolutely superb. So rather than focusing on Di2, Shimano, 13 speed Dura-Ace that will cost more than the price of a bloody car, for God's sake, why not just produce a mechanical 13 speed that everyone can use? We'll get rid of a second chainring, we'll get rid of another derailleur, more cabling, another changer. It's going to make life so much easier. And I've shown you the ratios. You can still get a decent range from top to bottom. That's not going to be an issue. Yes, the jumps are going to be bigger, but it's not going to be a huge problem for a normal cyclist. I think people in the biking industry, you have to get away from this obsession with making everything designed for road bikes. 13 speed, I think, is destined for everyday bikes. To prove this point, take a look at some of these photos here. All these photos are actually from the rigs from the 2023 Tour Divide. Now, for those of you that don't know what the Tour Divide is, it's a crazy race or ride, 2,745 miles from Banff in Canada, across the border, down through the Rocky Mountains and to the Mexican border. It's probably the most extreme test of endurance off-road that you can find on the cycling calendar. It's crazy. It's a self-reliant race. It's mental. And in 2023, what are these guys choosing to ride with in terms of the drivetrain? Look at this. They're choosing overwhelmingly to use a 1x drivetrain. That's close to 80%. When you put in the single speeds, when you put in the roll-off, which is a 14 speed, a pinion and a fixed gear, you're getting close to 90% of the people are using a 1x system. These guys are choosing to use a 1x drivetrain for a very good reason. It's not about being light, it's not about having a great range, a bad range, the jump between ratios, nothing like that. They're looking for reliability. And when 90% of people on this kind of endurance race are looking for reliability, that tells us all a lot. It means it is bloody reliable. So why can't we have it? We don't care about the bigger jumps when it comes to changing gear, but we do care about price and we do care about reliability. So I would ask the cycling industry to look at this and start putting 13 speeds, single gear on more affordable bikes. I think that's the way forward. I think this could be revolutionary in the cycling industry. I hope they do it. I kind of think it'll be a long time coming, and I think they'll kind of fiddle around with Di2 and ETAP and all the higher end kind of group sets. I think it's a mistake. I think they need to focus on the affordable side. It's exciting times. I think eventually as well we're going to come to 14 speed, and surely at 14 speed that's more than enough. I mean, the roll-off hubs, they use 14 speed. The jumps between ratios are going to get smaller and smaller. It could really almost do away with a 2x drivetrain in most circumstances. I think they'll always be there. I don't think a 1x is going to completely change the way cycling is in terms of the way we've gone from rim brakes pretty much to disc brakes. I've still got a couple of rim brake bikes, but I have to say that disc brakes are really so much better. But I think in the space of the next 5 to 10 years we're going to see a hell of a lot more 1x drivetrains, and I welcome it. And I'm now considering, when the time's right and the time's ready for a change with any of my bikes, that I will actually go to a 1x system.